The woman in white. How many others had there been? I sat on this question, and on the identity of the woman in white, for nearly 3 years. I simply didn't know what to do. At least, not until the day Mom finally got the pantry door unstuck. The house had been a fixer-upper, to put it charitably, when we bought it years earlier, but we hadn't done much fixing up. The realtor had told Mom that we'd have a pantry, in theory, but that the previous owners hadn't even been able to get the door open. There was ample enough cupboard space that we never put much effort into it, beyond a few errant tugs of the knob. But on this day, Mom's drinking habit had finally tipped beyond what our cupboards and fridge could hold. She'd needed somewhere to put the rest of her liquor, and it was with an addict's determination for a fix that she managed the impossible. It was wonderful to have a pantry, she gushed that evening. Only, she'd have to figure out how to get rid of that terrible chill in there. I waited for Mom to retire to her bedroom for the night before making my way to the pantry door. I'm still not sure how, but I knew I'd find a mark inside. Only the details remained, waiting to be discovered. I opened the door, shivering as I stepped inside, grateful to be away from the Wheeler winter air. Jesus, this place was freezing. A fresh pang of guilt perched atop an already abundant layer of the stuff. How could Sarah have left him out here? There was a mahogany coat rack near the door, but I had no intention of removing my coat. Tattered though it was, I was numb with cold and wore only a thin blouse underneath. I stamped my feet on the mat to knock off the snow, then strode to the front desk, where an impossibly gorgeous woman, dressed in white, looked up from her work. She smiled sweetly at me. "How can I help you, ma'am?" I spoke, forcefully, in hopes that an air of confidence might help my chances. "I'm here to pick up my father, Vernon Chadwick." The woman, Edith, her name tag said, continued to smile, though the sweetness seemed to fade a bit. "And, you are?" "I'm his daughter, Geraldine." Edith opened a drawer and pulled out a file. "It says here that Vern was placed by a woman named Sarah Trevor." "My sister," I said, struggling to keep the disdain from my voice. "She shouldn't have dumped him here like this. I've only just found out." "I'm sorry," Edith said, and she did not look sorry at all. "But your sister has already paid a substantial sum to place your father in our care. I'm afraid I can't allow anyone except her, or her husband, to remove him." "What if I paid you?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. I had no money to pay, of course, but I had bigger problems at the moment. "You don't understand," Edith said. "There are policies in place here. Regulations. Paperwork. I can't just let anyone come in and snatch away one of my residents whenever they please. I don't even have any proof that you are whom you say you are." I scrambled through the torn pocket of my coat for my wallet, so that I could show this woman my ID. But I didn't have it. I'd left immediately after finding out Dad was here, and I hadn't even thought to bring it. "Can I?" My voice broke. "Can I at least see him? He'll be able to tell you who I am." What was left of Edith's smile faded entirely, and her face, still beautiful, was now terrible too. "Vern won't be able to tell us anything at all, I'm afraid." "What are you talking about?" "Of course, he will. Listen, I'm not leaving until..." Edith held up a hand and interjected with an impatient air. "Ma'am," she began, but then our eyes met, and her expression softened. She sighed heavily. "Okay. All right. But you'll need to fill out some forms." She gestured to a room behind her. "Back there, you'll see an open closet. There will be a few clipboards on a shelf. Grab one of those, and fill out the papers on it." I breathed a sigh of relief, almost unable to comprehend how quickly Edith's demeanor had changed. It had been jarring, certainly, but not unwelcome. "And once I fill out these forms," I thought as I walked into the other room and grabbed a clipboard, "I'll be able to see." Every muscle in my body clamped up at once as a needle, long and thin, slid into my neck. I lost my balance, falling backward, but could not move my arms enough to catch myself. I hit the floor with a thud, my head smacking the wood. I realized with horror, as I lay there, that I was completely paralyzed. I could not move at all. From behind me, I felt Edith's hand slide under my armpits. She dragged me across the floor, then lay me down roughly. Something was leaking passively from the hole in my neck, though I didn't know if it was blood or whatever she'd injected me with. My head was pointed at the ceiling, and I heard a small commotion next to me, but I could not turn to see. But then, Edith knelt beside me, and with one hand, nails exquisitely polished, she tilted my head to the side. There was a rug bunched on the floor, moved from its place, and an open trapdoor with a ladder leading down into darkness. And there was that sweet smile again. "Geraldine," she crooned. "Do you see that cellar? You're going to die down there. And it's all because you're an ugly, tiresome woman, and I don't want to look at you anymore." And with that, she grabbed me by the front of my old, ratty coat, and hurled me roughly through the hole in the floor. I regained consciousness near the pantry, lying in my sweat. I wasn't sure why I had awoken so suddenly. Perhaps Geraldine had landed on her neck, I mused. Such a fate would surely have been preferable to whatever Edith had in store for her. I got to my hands and knees, feeling weak, and looked toward the place where the trapdoor had been hidden, directly under our kitchen table. But it wasn't there anymore, just a flat hardwood surface. I crawled over to it and looked more closely. There was a slight color difference. Some planks of wood were newer than others. There had been something here, but no longer. The sound of Chuck a few feet away, whining at his customary spot on the kitchen floor, tore me from my thoughts. It would be easy, I realized, to remove access to a building's cellar, but harder to remove the cellar itself. And I knew, as surely as I knew the color of my own eyes, that if someone were to rip out our kitchen floor, they would find a cellar underneath, and a dusty set of bones, perhaps still clad in an old, tattered coat. I knew something else, too. What to do next? I rang the doorbell and waited for a moment. But it wasn't long before the old lady answered, smiling sweetly. "Oh, come in, she said with enthusiasm, ushering me inside. "Hang your coat there," she said, pointing at a mahogany coat rack in her entrance hall. "Now, I've got hot water on the stove for tea. Let me offer you a cup." I nodded my agreement and followed her into her tidy, spacious home. It was elegant without being showy, the decor was timeless. She gestured to a couch in her living room, and before long she tottered back into the room with 2 steaming mugs of tea. She sat on a plush armchair across from me. "It's nice to meet you, Edith," I said. "Well, I just can't imagine why anyone would want to bother with me," she replied, "but regardless, you seem like a very nice young man, and I'm glad to be speaking with you." I grinned and pulled out my phone. "Do you mind if I record this? It'll help our conversation flow more naturally if I'm not taking notes." She hesitated for an almost unnoticeable moment, before nodding her assent. "Yes, of course, that's fine." "Excellent," I said, then started my voice recording app, set my phone down, and began what would prove to be a very short interview. "So, as Ms. Vance, your daughter, I call her Ms. Vance, probably told you, I'm a writer with the high school newspaper, The Forecaster. Yes, we're doing profiles on people in our community who are, getting on in years, but who have made a lot of great contributions in their lifetime that can sometimes go unnoticed or unappreciated. Well, I'm certainly getting on in years, but," she paused for a moment as if choosing her words carefully. "But I'm pleased with how I spent them. I'm pleased with what I did." "I'm sure you are," I replied. "Now, what your daughter may not have told you is that I have a particular interest in telling your story because you worked at the Halliburton home. I'm sure you've seen that it's been remodeled into a house since then?" "Oh, yes," she said. "I ran the place. And Jacqueline mentioned that you live there now, which I think is just wonderful. I'm so glad the old bones are still around." It took me a moment, but I eventually realized that Jacqueline had to be Ms. Vance, and continued. "No sense in prolonging anything. So, my first question. Did you ever meet anyone angry that their family member had been put in hospice care? Maybe they would have come back one night, saying that they didn't approve, and they wanted this person, their father, let's say, to be given back to them? Believe me when I tell you that a smile has never fallen off of a human head so fast." She spoke haltingly. "Why on earth would your first question be?" "Because the ghost of Vernon Chadwick's daughter, Geraldine, appeared to me and told me all about it," I said, eager to press my interrogation forward. "She's still under our kitchen, you know." I suppose the ghost bit wasn't exactly true, but it had the intended effect. Edith was completely stunned. I wish you could have seen her face. "Okay, so, pass on question 1, then," I went on. "Next question. When you unalived Dorothy, the woman who was staying in what's now our guest room, how hard was it to clean up all the blood after?" I only asked because she didn't show me that part. I saw the razors, and the bit with the intestines, but I can't imagine it would have been very fun, cleaning up. "I'm going to be sick," Edith stammered. "Okay, but before you go throw up or whatever, one more question. Are you worried about what's going to happen when you die?" By this point, Edith had turned as white as the medical gown she once wore. "Are you threatening me?" "Oh, no, actually," I said. I'm not a psychopath, so I'm not going to hurt a sweet old lady. Thank you for the tea, by the way," I said, holding up my mug before taking a sip. I was having more fun than I had expected. Maybe I was wrong, and there's a bit of psychopath in all of us. I don't even want to bring you to any kind of earthly justice, given that it sounds like a lot of trouble, and no offense, but you're probably not going to last much longer anyway, I continued. "I'm just wondering, when you die, you know you're going to have to answer to them, right?" "Who?" Edith began. "The people you unalived at Halliburton home," I said as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "They're going to be waiting for you. Surely you didn't expect to face no consequence?" "You're a nasty liar," Edith said, clearly shaken, but all pretense of sweetness was now absent. I wondered how this venomous being before me had ever been capable of playing the kindly old woman. I shook my head. "How else would I know this, Edith? Ask yourself. Ask yourself. Is there any other way?" She sat, staring at her lap, and I stood. "I should go," I said, "before you try and stick a needle in my neck. I'll write a nice article about you, though, I promise." Her eyes flickered over to my phone, still recording the conversation. "As I said, Edith, I'm not here to get you in trouble. I'm here to take away your peace." My peace?" "Yes," I said. "You didn't just unalive people, Edith. You tortured them. Maimed them. Many of them spent their final days terrified of the night you'd walk through their door. I don't know why you did it, but I know how the people you did it to felt. And I think it's only right that, in your final days, you feel the same way." I paused for a moment, before concluding. "They agree. Edith died only 6 months later. I went to the funeral.